Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside Journal Star Studios for another season, another year of the Life in the Red podcast. Same crew. We haven't changed. Still us. Luke, Amie, Wilson, back on it.
Did you point at Wilson while saying Luke?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing over here. I'm just so excited to have Wilson back. Bring up the energy in here. Me and Amie were we're just sad all the time versus Wilson.
What?
Wilson brings the energy.
How dare you?
But anyway, I mean, it's been a couple months. Obviously, we've had some time to take off from the podcast. Hope all of you have been coping all right in the meantime. But it's business time now. We're 1 month away from the season, which seems really close.
Yeah, I was just rebooking our hotels before we got in here, and that it's crunch time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just got back, too, from being on the road. As we're talking about going on the road, we'll get into all the details about Nebraska fall practice, everything we've learned in the last week. But I want to start with big event. My first time going out to Big Ten Media Days out there in Indianapolis. We were all there seeing all the scenes, hearing everything from around the conference. But, of course, it was a big opportunity for Matt Rhule, his first time there in front of the conference. And seemed to make the most of it, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He told several people, including me, that he wanted to be the first one there when the doors opened. And he was. He was the first coach there, making the rounds on Radio Row. He didn't have to speak for several hours, but he was just making the most of all of the media appearances that he could do with that blitz that he was doing with all the national people and some of the local people as well. And, he made an impression from the jump. I was wrong, though. I thought he was going to do a pretty long, opening statement, kind of wax poetic about what the Big Ten has meant to him, what Penn State means to him, what this opportunity means to him. But he kept it short and sweet and left it up for a lot of questions. One of the things that he said that really stuck out to me at that moment was that he wants to get Nebraska back to being a program that's respected and then feared, which I thought was interesting. He's always been, at least in the off season, he's always been measured approach. We're not going to build this right away. And he, said that again, but I just thought it was interesting that he changed up the verbiage, which was nice. So we didn't have to, keep quoting him basically saying the exact same thing.
I mean, I think his point about getting that respect back is interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on it, Wilson, because, Amie and I, we've lived in Nebraska, a long time, big parts of our lives. But, what was your kind of outside perception of Nebraska? Do you think that element of respect around the football program, did that kind of diminish in the last few years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I remember, growing up in Minnesota, so I have been around the Big Ten my whole life. And, so that was a big deal when Nebraska joined the Big Ten. And at that time, in what was the early 2010s, Nebraska was still known as this big football power, and that was a big deal that they were coming to Nebraska. That hasn't been the case for the better part of the past decade now. So I definitely saw what he was getting at with that of, there was a time when Nebraska was talked about, in the same breath as an Ohio State. Ethan Piper basically made that comparison at the when he was at his own podium. That's a point they're trying to get back to. And obviously the college football landscape is vastly different, even just in the past 10 years of the time when Nebraska was at that elite spot, but we do know it's possible.
Yeah. And the thing about that too is you have this opening, press conference of the Matt Rhule era. If we take it back to November when he's just talking about being a kid, growing up a Penn State fan, he's talking about the Orange Bowl, those are kind of, I think, the memories that he has about the Nebraska program. So I think that kind of factors in, in his head, it's a national championship winning team, somebody that's known for that versus people our age, that I wasn't alive for that. You know the history of it.
Let the record
obviously.
reflect I was alive for that.
Yeah, sorry. I should
see Amie rolling her eyes out of the corner of my eye.
I was alive for that. For the most recent ones, not the 70s ones. But
oh, good.
Just making sure.
Just to clarify.
But
my point is, that the players that are coming through, this generation of people watching college football, they don't necessarily have that same, context of Nebraska as a national champion power. So I think just his overall point to build respect being that first step, I think is huge. And he's already done a long way in getting them there. And I think the other big takeaway that I had was just the energy, the excitement that Rule brings. I mean, we see that kind of on a day-to-day basis. He's an animated speaker. It doesn't really matter what it is, but when you're there, you're in front of the whole conference. Like, you want to bring your best. You want to represent the best in Nebraska, and I think he absolutely did that.
Yeah, absolutely. He did well. There was a question that was asked that I don't know how I would have answered it, but he, had a master class in answering questions that you're not quite sure where they're going and if they are questions and what they mean. So that was one of the more memorable moments for me, was how do you adapt to something on the fly where you may or may not know exactly what you're being asked, if that makes sense.
Question the question.
Oh, I question the question, no doubt. But he did well in a very strange situation too.
Yep, totally agree. And also worth noting, the player representatives that were out there at Big Ten Media Days, got the chance to talk to them too. Always, kind of a big honor for those players to be selected to go out. And the three players that Rule picked, Jeff Sims, Luke Reimer, and Ethan Piper, he said, there are a bunch of other guys he could have taken, but we got the chance to chat with these guys for a lot of time. And I think let's just start with Sims. Obviously the expectations are high coming in as a starting quarterback, but everything you see from him, he's a calm guy. He's very composed about everything. And he talked a lot about kind of what progress he's made with these wide receivers so far. It seems like he's really excited as well, of course, about everything coming into the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't over at Jeff Sims' table, but yeah, that seems to be the indication. I mean, he's at the end of spring, or I guess in the middle of spring, there was some things were up in the air. Who was the starting quarterback going to be? Was it going to be Sims? Was it going to be Casey Thompson? That's out the window now. This is Jeff Sims' team, and we're going to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I was over there for bits and pieces of it, and he, was very calm, very composed. He's a man who's done this before. Obviously, where he was at before is not necessarily the same as where he is now, but he's had experience with this, and I think that him leading a program previously has kind of helped him in that way, because he knows what works and what doesn't. And obviously, there are intricacies between teams that don't cross over, but he knows how to lead, and he has done that from the very beginning. And, to paraphrase Ethan Piper, it's like he's been here, for years, which is good for them.
Yep, certainly that level of comfort so quickly, is a testament to the work he's put into that. And Luke Reimer got the chance to talk to him a bit. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on the 3-3-5, how that install is going so far. And something that I wanted to ask him is, hey, you've got all these different, basics down, but if the season was starting, today, if today was August 31st, how ready are you guys to go out there and play? And he said, hey, we'd be pretty comfortable. Obviously there's some different aspects, more complex things to the defense that they'll need to install during fall practice. But, he's confident in what they've got down so far, which is good to hear. And then Ethan Piper representing the offensive line, that's a group where they're looking for major improvements, and he's one of those guys leading the charge.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought he was a real representative of the offensive line as a whole. We heard in the spring Matt Rule talking about, these guys took a lot of heat last year, and they're trying to get past that. And I think Piper really embodied that, both in that he wants to play better, he wants the line to play better, and he's a guy from Nebraska who takes a lot of pride in, what Rule was talking about up at the podium, that there was a time when Nebraska was respected, it was feared, and he remembers that. He knows how big Nebraska football is, just what an institution it is to the entire state of Nebraska, and he wants to see it get back to that point of being, one of the top programs in the Big Ten.
Nebraska coaches and players alike, they were all united on that front, major topic. They were out there, and a few other updates we can share coming out of Big Ten Media Days, other things to discuss. I got some injury news there. Safety Marquise Buford coming off an ACL tear. Rule said he won't take part in fall practice right away. said Nebraska will be smart with him. That's kind of something that they've talked about a lot. Those types of injuries, being careful with that. You don't want another ACL tear. Make sure that those things heal fully before they get a guy back. Left tackle Teddy Prohaska, on the other hand, Rule said full go for the fall. Dealt with injuries either of the last 2 years. So that's good news to hear. And then something else that's kind of been, up in the air over this offseason, tight end Eric Gilbert, double 2-time transfer. There's questions there about NCAA approving a waiver. Still waiting on the news about that. Rules hopefully can play, but for now that situation is still stretching out 1 month ahead of the season.
Yeah, and I asked Rule about it if he had been given any indication of any potential timeline for any of this, and he just said, nope, they're just kind of at the mercy of the NCAA at this point.
Which is headquartered in Indianapolis, maybe could have, knock on their door if that's something you can do with a huge...
I wouldn't.
Discouraged?
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. That would feel probably like a bad thing to...
Well, you can't just go down there. I demand the waiver now. Probably why I'm not a coach. But athletic director Trev Alberts was also there in Indy. Good what you want to see from the AD, looking over the program. Big, important time for him. And we got a couple updates about the new football facility. Alberts said it will not be 100% ready this fall. Locker room, really important thing. They want to get that completed by the time the season starts, and they're on track for that. But there's other things, training table, weight room, different offices, facilities. I mean, this construction project, some of that stuff is maybe over my head too, but these things tend to drag out a little bit. So it's a little bit, unfortunate. They wanted this project to be ready, but just the reality of where it is, they're still getting some of that stuff finished up right now. And hey, it's not like they aren't used to dealing with Memorial Stadium already. So I don't think that's a major issue.
No. And like Matt said today, it's like, I will continue to work in my office until they tell me I have to move. So, because it's not like his office is bad. It's pretty cushy in there. So I can only imagine what the next one will look like.
Absolutely. So still work continuing there. That was the update from athletic director Trev Alberts. And other things to bring up real quick while we're still on Big Ten Media Days. New commissioner, Tony Petitti, his first time addressing the conference. It seems like his priority is getting that TV deal done. Still some questions
Still
over
not
that.
done.
Yeah.
Still not done.
Which is, it's like, okay, season's going to be starting soon. And, this is something really important. We're seeing Pac-12, Big 12, like the TV deals. I mean, this stuff is so important for the future of the conference. So you got to get those details ironed out. I mean, this is a major moneymaker for the Big Ten.
Yeah, and it's crunch time. Like, you can't not have this done. Like, this needs to be done now. It needed to be done months ago. Honestly, it shouldn't have been his problem at all. It should have been done under the previous commissioner and made promises that could not have been fulfilled. So still working out some of those things. Yeah, not great, but it'll get done and we will all forget about the hiccups probably years from now. Oh, remember when that didn't get done on time? Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be watching 2:30 games on CBS and primetime games on NBC soon enough.
I am not ready for CBS. As a former SEC reporter, that music, I associate that with the SEC. So it is going to take a while for that to break in my brain. Be like, oh yeah, can't wait for, Auburn, and then it's Michigan. What?
This doesn't make sense.
No, It doesn't make sense. But we'll get there. It's all going to be a learning adjustment for all of us. Absolutely.
So Commissioner Petitti, he was there, but I think, the big topic, national media, lots of focus on Northwestern, the recent hazing scandal. Pat Fitzgerald moves on. They bring in interim head coach David Braun. Yeah, sorry.
Fired.
Thanks for the precision. But David Braun, he's the one up there, fielding questions. You had a kind of poignant column kind of addressing the Northwestern leadership. You really focused on this topic, which was major news. What was kind of just your takeaways about what happened in Indy and how kind of Braun and Northwestern addressed the situation?
Yeah, so a lot of different columnists had a lot of different perspectives. I think the other ones are wrong. What I took away from that was the leadership at Northwestern. How do I say this nicely? They are totally in over their heads. They are, just not prepared to deal with this, and they don't want to deal with this. And so they have completely avoided the media. Their athletic director was present in Indianapolis, but he did a one-on-one interview with the Big Ten Network in the press box so he could, stay hidden and, be away from all the other media who would love to talk to him. But no, it was embarrassing from, in my view, at how Northwestern handled it in the beginning, continued to handle it at the Big Ten Media Days, and is continuing to handle it as more lawsuits keep coming out. I thought it was, the word that I keep coming back to is just, it's embarrassing. Like, why would you have your, interim head coach who has only been at the helm of the program for just a few weeks, who has only been with the program at all since January, and you trot him out there to be the face of the university when, why would he, have the authority to speak on what the university as a whole is doing and all of these things? Granted, I felt a little bit bad for the guy, but then when he had the chance to be a little empathetic or just show empathy to anybody, nope, this is, this is adversity that we have to go through. I'm like, not the right tone, is it adversity? Yes. But this is not your quarterback tearing his ACL. This is, deeply, deeply troubling stuff that, is likely affecting the players in the program right now. And so I just felt that a lot of it was really tone deaf, even though he was put in an unenviable position by his athletics administration, the university administration, because they're too scared to say anything, and it's embarrassing. And I know there's legal stuff going on right now, but you can be empathetic while also not saying anything at all. It's really not that hard. But apparently it is just impossible for Northwestern to be able to convey both of those two things. And instead they just look like buffoons. Anyway, moving on.
But yeah, I think just real quick, I think no accountability. None from anyone involved in the situation, which is just ridiculous. So that was major topic. Thanks for your thoughts, Amie.
Yeah, you're welcome. My blood's boiling. It's made me so mad. I just feel bad for, the alleged victims and the players who are still in that program because they don't have a leader to lead them right now. And it's just sad. Everybody deserves better.
Yeah, you don't want anything like this going on in college athletics. Is just horrible to see because you want to assume the best. You want players to grow, to progress, to have lives that are better as a result of, being part of a team. So something like that just kind of shakes it to the core. And at the same time, you have this major Northwestern scandal. While there was, some other questions for coaches and programs to handle, Michigan's Jim Harbaugh, news coming out that he might face a 4-game suspension for lying to the NCAA. He deflected everything.
You could tell he wanted to talk about it, though. You could tell he wanted to, say something, but he was told that he couldn't. And so he had to, be good and, not go off on anything. But he wanted to talk. He did. I'll give him that. You could tell he wanted to say something.
For sure.
And PJ Fleck, he did say something.
Yeah. And Minnesota's PJ Fleck, there was a report about kind of a quote unquote toxic culture that came out about the program, and he was ready to shoot that one down.
Yeah, and that story, could you have written it? Yeah, but I would have framed it different. I personally probably wouldn't have written that story, but you could have written that story with the angle of PJ Fleck is a really weird dude, and it probably would have gotten better play instead of just this is all toxic and culty. And yeah, like college football is culty. Like it is. We're all fans of our respective cults and we get brainwashed into drinking the Kool-Aid every year, even when things aren't great. Like, yeah, there's some aspects of, cultiness that come along with college football. But yeah, no, if the article would have had the angle of PJ Fleck is just a really weird guy, I think it would have gone over a little bit better. And then there's Iowa too, which, I mean, so many scandals.
Too many to even list off,
I know.
to be honest.
What were you saying, Wilson? Sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially like it's easy to compare it to like Northwestern, and it's not the same. It's more just, like you said, you read it, you're like, that's weird. That's what I found myself saying a lot reading it. I was like, oh, that's strange. That is a weird
I thought
thing.
it was kind of like power tripping a little bit, was kind of like the vibe I got, but again, it pales in comparison to like some of this other stuff that's actually going on. So certainly that was the Big Ten Media Days experience. Good time out there in Indianapolis. But back to Lincoln, and before that could even happen, some major news here for the Nebraska football program. Shake up to the coaching staff right before fall practice. Tight ends coach Bob Wager resigned on Friday following a Wednesday morning traffic stop in downtown Lincoln. These are the details according to Lincoln police logs. He was pulled over at about 1:30 a.m. Wednesday morning. He was cited on suspicion of first offense DUI with a suspected blood alcohol content of 0.15 or higher, about twice the legal limit. And he was also cited on suspicion of careless driving, possessing an open alcohol container in the vehicle, and refusing a preliminary and chemical test. So tough situation, but resigned seemingly of his own accord very soon after. But I think kind of the important thing to highlight here is that we've heard a lot from Matt Rule about how he wants his coaches to kind of lead the example, to build these young men, teach character, make sure that they progress in that regard. And to me, this just stands out as an event that has no place. And Rule was very nice. He thanked Wager for his time today. But I think it's very clear that he's not going to have any ability to deal with something like that and just move on from it. It has to be addressed quickly.
Yeah. And, if you look in the contracts of all of the coaches at the University of Nebraska, a DUI is terms for, that's grounds for termination. So, obviously, it's on a case-by-case basis, but the boilerplate language in there is that if you get a DUI, you can be fired for it. So we saw that with the men's golf coach last year. He technically resigned too, but my sources indicate he was asked to resign on that one. So it boggles my brain that this is something that still happens. There are so many people out there who would give somebody a ride. And it doesn't need to be like, oh, I'm like going in on Bob. Like this is just like a culture thing. Like there's so many people who would give somebody else a ride. There's Uber, there's Lyft. Like there's so many avenues where like this doesn't need to happen. I'm very glad nobody got hurt here. But we hear so many stories of just one mistake completely changing the course of somebody's life forever. And it doesn't need to happen. And so I hope that whatever this is, whether it is just a one-time thing or maybe there's something deeper there, that gets figured out, because society does not need this. It doesn't. There's so many avenues to where we can avoid this happening. And yet you check any police log anywhere in the country, any day of the year, and there will be a suspected DUI everywhere. And it doesn't need to happen. Sorry, my soapbox, I just get so pissed about it.
Well, it's just disappointing to see someone in a position of leadership like that who's, worked towards a very prestigious job that, people worked their entire lives to, getting ready to start it and throw it away with a bad decision like that.
Yeah, I feel really bad for his son, who is currently on the team.
Yeah.
I hope that he is still treated with kindness and respect.
And obviously, we wish the best for Wager moving on whatever his next venture is. But looking at kind of the effects of what this does to Nebraska, he had 6-7 months to get to know the tight ends in his room, to work with them. A lot of that progress that you make, some of it, I'm sure, they'll be able to carry through. Some of it they might have to pick up, do some new things. But the good news is that newly instated tight ends coach Josh Martin, he's already been on staff. He's worked with these guys a little bit. He has experience working with tight ends in the past. So I don't think there should be a major learning curve. We saw him out there at practice, and he seemed really comfortable today anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he's done this before.
Yep.
Granted, not quite at, not to knock the Pac-12, but Nebraska is not Arizona State. Sorry, it's not. I may get some hate for that, and that's fine. But yeah, so, I mean, he's done it before. Rule said today that he wants to have, talented guys, young guys waiting in the wings for, if an unfortunate situation like this arises, or if somebody gets a promotion somewhere else and you can just promote from within and keep building that coaching tree. He dropped a name today that I thought was interesting, as a potential somebody who could get that opportunity in the future, Christian Ellsworth. He was at South Carolina before, and Shane Beamer's staff really, really, really liked him. They were upset that he, left because they thought he had a bright future there. He is also the son of my middle school history teacher. So
random connections.
Always
here on the pod.
Always.
Yeah.
And my middle school dance teacher is his mom. So Nebraska.
Yep, that's
you
right.
never
That's
know.
right.
But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting that he that Rule brought Christian's name up today, because I think the same also Grand Island Northwest legend quarterback still has so many of those records. Anyway, moving on.
Yep, recognition from the head coach, of somebody on staff who he appreciates. But the other quick point about Wager moving on is that he was going to be a major player in Nebraska's ability to recruit Texas. I mean, longtime high school coach down there, major program Arlington Martin, brought Ismail Smith-Flores and Jeremiah Charles to the 2023 class. But like I said, Martin also is going to be able to do the very same thing. His dad, Joe Martin, is the executive director of the Texas High School Coaches Association. So major connections there. He's been within the state. He worked at SMU. So things should still be pretty comfortable on the recruiting front there.
Yeah, especially on a staff run by Matt Rule, a guy who knows, who coached in Texas, knows Texas, even though he's not from there, knows the recruiting scene, knows how important that is just as a recruiting hotbed, and knows knows enough about players to recruit there.
Yeah, and one thing, I don't think Bob is going to badmouth Nebraska. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, no, he's not on staff anymore recruiting Texas. But if people are going to want to ask him about Texas, I still think he's going to have good things to say. And, he's not on staff, so he can't help recruit. But, I mean, he can play the role of a proud dad and help, in that way, too. So I don't think, they're going to lose that entirely.
Yeah.
Just it'll be in a different capacity.
Yeah. The intent matters, making those connections. And
yeah,
we've seen lots of coaches across the staff at Nebraska do that. So that's the update there. New tight ends coach Josh Martin in place. But as I mentioned, we got to see him out there for a little bit today. We had a brief open period of today's first fall practice. Like I said, 1 month away from the season. I got to take in a little bit of the morning action and, pretty basic, kind of what you'd expect from day one practice, just running through your drills, working with your teammates and stuff. But the really interesting thing that we have this year that Rule put into place is getting all those players into the dorms, getting them rooming with each other. Really unique situation. And it seems like they're making the most of it, right?
Yeah, and I'll be writing about that today because I think it's super fascinating and I have a take on it. Shocking. But yeah, so I thought it was funny that, Ty Robinson said today he's not a super big fan of it because he's too tall for the bed, which, valid.
Can't say I've ever had that experience.
Me either.
Wilson,
Shocking.
maybe Wilson.
Maybe. I'm trying to think back. I might have. Going back to, like freshman year of college when I was in the dorms myself,
Yes.
not here, but.
Struggle.
Yeah. So, and some outlets didn't work, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's all about building that bond with your teammates. This is not something Nebraska has done in a very, very, very long time. And I am interested to see the payoff. They're going to be in the dorms for 2 weeks and then they'll go home. Wherever they're living, some of them will be in a different dorm. So they'll move from dorm to dorm, or, on campus living, I guess. Things have changed since I was in college. And then they'll go back and it'll be 10 days before the first game of the season, which is wild to think that it is that close. But yeah, I am super fascinated to see how the next 2 weeks go in terms of like a brotherhood building standpoint.
I like that they're making the coaches go into the dorms too.
With the exception of the 2 who are over 60.
Gives me major like the coaches like are being like the RAs there. Like those are the vibes I'm getting,
I think Matt Rule even mentioned he's staying in like an RA room. He doesn't have a roommate.
Yeah, good luck. I'd like to see him going around, enforcing some rules and whatnot, but
not knocking on doors, making sure everyone's at curfew.
Right.
Well, it's easier to check on curfew if you're literally there with them.
But I think one of the other things I really like is it seems like when they were pairing up players, getting them roommates, they tried to get an offensive player with a defensive player, different years to, a junior with a freshman, whatever it might be, just making guys, talk to somebody, be in close proximity with maybe a teammate that, yeah, you know him, you talk a little bit, but have you ever spent an hour, 10 hours with them? I mean, I think that's the big thing to me that I take away when they're talking about building brotherhood. It's like, yeah, you're going to be familiar with everybody in your position group, with some of those guys that, you've been working with for 3-4 years. But what about somebody who you barely know at all? What does 2 weeks of closeness, what does that do for them?
Hopefully they don't snore.
Right? Get some earplugs.
Yeah, no kidding. Is that a good enough rule? Or is that a good enough exception to go off campus if you need to buy some earplugs because your roommate snores?
Good question.
Because the players are not allowed off of campus without an exception from one of the coaches.
They might have some in the C store there for them.
Oh, but those are pricey.
You never know.
Those are. I mean, I feel like the price would be a little higher on those as opposed to like Walmart or Target or something.
We'll check in with the players next week, see if there's any snoring related incidents.
Sorry, that's just all I think of when sharing a room with somebody new is just, I hope they don't snore. Anyway, sorry, moving on.
Yeah, moving on. So the other big thing that we want to talk about today, more personnel updates. We got some in Indianapolis, but there were some other things that Rule was wanting to share today. And starting off with defensive lineman Brody Tagaloa. Unfortunately, he was injured in a car accident last week, which he required knee surgery from. He's currently at home recovering with his family. Rule said they expect him to miss the season. Wish him the best in his recovery. Promising young player who really hasn't been able to get on the field much because of injuries, move between tight end, move back to defensive line, and just really unfortunate when you consider, right before the season, not football related. That's just a very tough situation for him. So wish him the best.
Yeah, life. This is just a really sad example of life happens to everybody. I hope he's okay. And that, football aside, that he can just get back up on his feet and be okay to, live life once he's done with this. So all the best.
And the other players currently not with the team, safety Miles Farmer was suspended over the summer, not with the team. Maybe there's a path to work his way back. Rule said it's kind of all Miles' decision. He'll have to make the effort. And, he's very respectful of these players. He always talks about them positively, which I think is excellent. So we'll see what happens with Farmer. And regardless of what happens, he was major contributor last year. There's some different guys that have been stepping in, working at safety But I think it's a big thing where he's trying to establish this culture, enforce the rules, and it's a case where, yeah, he's going to support these players. He wants them to be a part of things, but if they can't quite fit in, I think that's what we've seen here. They're going to address that as needed.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. It's unfortunate. I don't know what the situation is, and I think that's just between those guys.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm sure the team would love to have him back. He played a lot of valuable reps last year and was a leader for them. But yeah, I hope he can come back. I liked Miles.
We'll see what happens with that. Again, it's a month before the season starts. Anything can happen in the next few weeks, and that door seems to be open. And then meanwhile, offensive lineman Jacob Hood, Georgia transfer, dealing with some ankle injuries, still trying to work his way back to full health. Wasn't out there today. Neither was wide receiver Josh Fleeks, who Rule said he reported to camp overweight. They're going to need to get that addressed, get that weight down, make sure he's in good shape, good conditioning to get back. So those were two of the other players that he gave an update on who weren't out there versus wide receiver Marcus Washington. We saw him. He was wearing a green no-contact jersey. The reason is that he broke a bone in his hand over the summer in a cast, could come off next week. Kind of tough for a wide receiver. That's your bread and butter right there. You got to keep those hands safe.
Yeah. But luckily for Marcus, it doesn't sound super serious. Like you said, it sounds like the cast will come off soon and it'll be a splint after that, which is usable. But yeah, for now, it sounds like he's able to do everything that doesn't involve hands, which is unfortunately a lot for a receiver.
Running.
But yeah, he can run, do conditioning, so he'll be able to stay in football shape, stay ready while this is all going on.
Yeah, and he's a major part of this offense. So I'm sure that they want to get him these reps, get him these snaps, this experience sooner rather than later.
Yeah, but thankfully for him, he should be okay, and it shouldn't affect the start of his season, which is...
Yeah, you don't want that to stretch into the actual season. So that's the good news on that update. And then a couple other real quick roster updates. Seth Malcolm, linebacker, and tight end Chase Androff. Those are two players no longer on the Nebraska roster, no longer on the team. Those updates as well. So, that's a lot. Personnel.
I went on a couple of rants too that didn't help. So sorry about that. I'm just in one of those moods today.
Remember, this is day one of fall practice. We got a lot more to come.
Well, I'm normally not going to go on, anti-establishment and anti-DUI rants on the same day, but here we are.
When we're previewing, Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, we're not gonna get any rants.
I hope that I don't have to do any of the off-field rants.
Of course, I'm joking.
But you never know when I'm gonna drop one of those.
For sure, but we have exciting things to come on the podcast. We'll have some positional breakdowns. We'll look forward. We'll preview the schedule, the entire season. More things to come in the next few weeks. Again, we'll be hearing from players and the coaches. More details to share with you. So appreciate all of you listeners, you viewers of Life in the Red. Keep on coming back for more. We've got a good season ahead. A lot of details to come. Me, Amie, and Wilson will be with you the entire way. So make sure to stay tuned. We'll be back at you next week. And thanks for tuning in to today's Life in the Red.